Hello, everyone. David here. Welcome back to the DGR podcast. This is episode number 79. I hope you're all doing incredibly well. I have a great guest for you today. I have Brandon Accardi. I met Brandon. The only time I actually really met him was he came to our Melbourne seminar in February in Melbourne Strength Culture, and I was very impressed with him then. Very nice guy. I think we had a couple of beers afterwards, maybe even a pizza. And smart guy, nice guy, and a very, very good coach. And I've been keeping I won't say close eye on him ever since, but because I don't really consume much content anymore. If I'm on Instagram, I'm on social media, it's like working on our page. But a far eye, let's say, I've been keeping an eye, and I can see the progress that he's making and the way he thinks about movement and the way he talks about movement. I'm very impressed, and I wanted to get him on to have a chat about that. He's a bit more in the weightlifting niche, but honestly, like these concepts can be just applied to anything, and we actually speak about that, having a good lens, having a good model of movement, and being able to apply that to any system. We spoke about constraints and cueing. We spoke about variety and variability, how important that might be. We spoke about shin angles, of course, a little bit about center of mass, and towards the end of the podcast we spoke about social media and like what types of posting strategies he's using or we're using, and just things like that, because I think he's starting to really push and make a good name for himself in the industry. And partly now the world we live in now is about doing a good job on social media and making sure that your ideas are out there, having good ideas and making sure you can get eyeballs on them and consistently do that in a focused manner, I would say. So yeah, I think it's tons of value in this podcast. Brandon is a super nice, smart guy. Make sure you give him a follow and give it a share if you like it. So without further ado, here's the pod. Enjoy.
Go on.
Okay, Brandon, welcome to the pod. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're the Irish Wonder Boy. I got told to. It's sticking. It's making.
You've been told to say a lot of stuff.
No, I haven't. It's. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, man. It's good to chat. You're my first guest in a while, actually.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with the podcast, and I've really been enjoying the Q&A or the solo ones, because I feel like I just really enjoy your thought process on certain things. But yeah, I noticed you haven't had a guest for a while, so I'm excited.
I think we kind of fell behind on the pod. Not fell behind, but like, yeah, it's, as you probably know now, so you started one, didn't you? And it's tough to stay on top of it, like, because it's not just the recording, it's actually the booking and the editing and all that other stuff as well.
Yeah, I found that I'd rather not do an episode if I just don't want to interview people for the sake of it, which I'm pretty sure you're on the same page with. Or I'd rather just have people who are like my friends who I can bounce ideas off, and then I feel like we may as well just record it, because I feel like people will get value out of it, regardless of the topic. So like whether it's content creation, business, or training, I feel like the like inquisitive person who's interested in training would just enjoy listening to that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a nice lens, like in even when you're putting up a post or, you know, actually trying to like define your niche. People talk about this all the time, defining your niche. And for me, I talk about things that I like talking about, and my niche is pretty much like people who like what I talk about. That's as far as I get into it. Whether right or wrong, that's what I think about.
Well, you could almost say that they're people who have the same kinds of values as you, not necessarily I want to learn how to supinate a foot. They're going to stay for your perspective on business, your perspective on content creation. And yeah, I think that people just, you do that graph where it's like becoming well known and known well. And you got to do both.
You got to do both, I think, if you want to be super, super, super successful. Or not, yeah, like relatively successful at least. But you do have a niche in the weightlifting world. Now, I would say most people in that world have a very specific niche. Would you say yours is less specific in terms of, would you say you have more people following you who aren't actually maybe that interested in weightlifting, but are interested in your thoughts just on movement?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say since I've been kind of expanding or just refining my thought process with the posts and just being a bit more deliberate with that strategy, I'm getting people who are coming to my page. They don't necessarily care about weightlifting specifically, and who like the nuances of like doing this in the pool or this kind of technique, that would make up such a small part of a seminar or the mentorship that I run. A majority of the concepts that I'm talking about are like my model for human movement, my model for programming, and then how can we filter that into your demographic or whatever you use. And that for myself, I draw a lot of inspiration from things outside of the field that are not necessarily in strength and conditioning, and I try and find just generally good principles that are like consistent in all fields, and how I can bring that into weightlifting or strength and conditioning. And I think just people just appreciate or enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. Like what? Where are you drawing inspiration from?
Well, there's definitely a lot of people. Well, if we talk about your lens for human movement, people wouldn't necessarily be looking to you for how to coach weightlifting better. But if you
definitely, I hope not.
but here's the thing: if you can understand propulsion strategies, and you understand mid stance, and you understand gait, and you understand how those things are reflected in human movement, you can start to understand, well, maybe I'm noticing these differences in, or these similarities in human movement. They're going to be present in all activities, regardless of the context. So trying to find things that exist without context and then bringing them into weightlifting. So gait and propulsive strategies are an example of ones that I've brought into weightlifting, and those things are resembled really well. And so often people will have a very rigid understanding of what they believe weightlifting technique to be. And if you just have a good understanding of human movement, a model that is that explains lots of different contexts, then that can be really useful. And then just try and bring, I know that's just one example that I can think of right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think a good model of human movement explains like all human movement pretty much. You're able to see anything. So I definitely wouldn't be able to coach weightlifting, but if someone sent me a video of a movement, a coach sent me a video of a movement and said like, or anyone sent me a video of them doing a movement and said like, I feel like I'm losing it here or something, I think I could be able to pick out I could be able to reason fairly well as to why that's happening. I might not be able to fix it, but I'd be able to maybe see that. Funnily enough, there's a client in my gym at the moment, and I told him he just wanted to come in and train, and I told him I was doing a podcast, and he said, am I allowed to do weightlifting in this gym? Well, there's some weightlifting in this program. He has an S&C program from the S&C coach, and so he said, I've never seen anyone doing any weightlifting here. I said, yeah, you can do whatever you want.
That's mad. So he just started training with you? Or
No. I rehabbed him like over 2 years ago, and we just trained together since. And yeah, that's what happens with a lot of clients. But then they like are back with their team and stuff, and they have some S&C that we're basically doing S&C then at that stage, but they have some S&C then that they have to follow a program. Sometimes they follow it, sometimes they don't follow it, but it's nice. He's actually said he's really enjoying, like I got him to show me some of the movements, and he said he's really enjoying playing around with that. It's his first time. But yeah,
can you do a bit of weightlifting yourself? Can you do any power cleans? Doesn't interest
you? It does not interest me at all. We used to do some, like as part of our GA team, we used to do some power cleans. Like, what's the difference between, because actually I was just looking there at his program, and he had a hang power clean. What's the difference between a hang power clean and a hang clean?
So if it says power, so power is the position you're going to catch it in. So if it's a power, you're going to catch it above parallel. And if it doesn't say power, then the coach is just denoting you to, or telling you to catch it into a full squat. So below parallel.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, then we would have done, I would have done a bit of both in the past.
Yeah, full squats.
Yeah, we would have done a bit of both. And then like, we also would have done like snatches and stuff, and lads just absolutely like hurlers and Gaelic footballers who need to be able to get their arms overhead, like can't train the next day because their shoulders are so fucked. So like
I would love to be a fly on the wall and watching that session. That would just be the best thing ever. People have flamed CrossFit for so long, but I would love to see some Gaelic footballers do cleans and snatches.
Yeah, so I actually worked with a client several years ago. This was like in my era of like hating CrossFit, and as a result, like probably hating weightlifting as well. Where I worked with a client who was one of the best hurlers in Ireland at the time, and like known for like being able to catch a ball overhead and all this stuff, just doing unreal things. And he said that he had to stop catching the ball overhead because his shoulder was sore constantly from doing snatches. I was like, would you not just take out the snatches? And he said, no, our S&C coach won't let us.
Oh,
So
man.
yeah, that like turned me off it. And now like I've come back around. I'm like, nah, it's just the right tool for the right job.
Just an exercise. The Olympic
It's just
lifts are just exercises. Yep.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about some of your like around the model that you have, because you've been trying to develop a model around weightlifting. I think you've done a really good job, and I've only really taken notice more of your content, Brandon, since you came to our workshop in, when was that? February.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, apologies, but like I've only been really watching since then, and I think it's been really nice to watch your journey, and it's really nice to, sometimes when you listen to podcast guests, you see people, listen to people who are at like the top of the industry, like they're there, you listen to whatever podcast, and it's like Mike Boyle and all these people who are just, they're there already, whereas I think you're not quite there. I'm definitely not there, but like there's a come up happening. I can see that come up happening, and so it's nice to see something as it's occurring. So what differences would you say? That's a bit of a shit question, but like around regular weightlifting, how people regularly look at weightlifting versus how you look at weightlifting. What are some big differences that you would see there, or at least like, I don't know, how would you explain it differently to a coach?
That's a good question. It's a great question, because now we can dive down all different kinds of avenues.
And you can go whatever way. Yeah, you can go whatever way you want.
Well, one of the big ones is if we talk about archetypes and how certain people are just built different. So if we start with the understanding that not all lifters are going to move the same because they have a different structure. So if we can kind of fit people into some neat little categories, that usually is a good place to start. So I'll usually, which is something that I've learned from Greg Hawthorne and Bill Hartman, and then obviously from your stuff, you've got cones, funnels, and rectangles. And those people are really well resembled in weightlifting. So you'll see people who are very effective in later phases of propulsion, your more funnels, who will pull back a little bit more effective in like ER. And they'll pull back, they'll have a bit more of an arm bend, whereas your rectangles, your wider athletes, like they're just wide everywhere. Those athletes are going to be very effective in mid stance. So when you see them perform a movement, they might cut the pull shorter, and they might sneak under the bar. They might not pull back as much.
When you say, what do you mean when you say pull back?
So imagine in the weightlifting, you know how in sprinting you see this like nice long extension.
Mm-hmm.
So in weightlifting, they talk about that as well. So you've got this nice, pretty extension at the top of the pull where you're shrugging. I'm like demonstrating shrugging.
Yeah. So this triple extended position, but
this triple extended position
is everywhere.
Exactly. It's in all sports. So in weightlifting, that triple extension, you might see that person, that athlete who's like, say, your wider ISA or your wider athlete, who they might be a little bit more vertical in that extension. Mm-hmm. Or you might not even see as full of an extension. Whereas your athlete who's a little bit narrower, particularly like more narrower through the pelvis, they might just like drive their body backwards, and because they're not as effective in mid stance. So you know how you've spoken a lot about hinging and how certain athletes are not as like, they might hinge from their ribs. You see that a lot in weightlifting where people will just extend their knees off the floor. And they'll want to create a bit of, they'll create that relative motion more so through their spine and through their ribs. And then when they get to mid stance, they'll just throw themselves backwards and create more of like a really extended posture where they'll throw their body back. And it's really common in weightlifting, if you don't have this understanding of different shapes producing force in different ways, to just say that those people are either one, outliers, or two, that's not an effective strategy, where some of the best weightlifters will actually move like that. So that just kind of sets people up to understand, well, hold on, maybe I don't need to outcoach these natural tendencies my athlete has, and maybe I need to just focus on good exercise selection to help leverage some other strategies that they're not as effective with. So understanding how to create a good quality hinge is so important, creating length through the glutes, because whenever that person, say if it's a narrower athlete who creates a lot of flexion through their spine, they just feel like they've just got sore hips all the time, or they just feel like they've never had their glutes worked. So you might like get them squatting, they might just have no ass. They might Yeah, usually that. Or they might just, you put them in a kickstand hinge and you just see them shake straight away. And that's on body weight. And I'm talking athletes who are clean and jerking 170 kilos and they just have never loaded those tissues because they've never been exposed to those, or they don't have that movement option. They actually don't have that position. So archetypes are a big part of the model. Things like center of mass, relative motion, being able to get into, not like internal rotation as a downward force is something that I've learned from you and taken from you. Whereas most people are exposed to a very linear model where we're looking for straight lines, where we just see there's a lot of arcs and there's a lot of rotation, and we need it in weightlifting.
What about the shins? I see you talking about shins a lot. Is that's definitely not talking about you?
That's not at all. No, most people
actually that's not talked about anywhere. Yeah, it's not talked about. The only place it's talked about is the sprinting world. You'll see like a ton of sprint coaches talk about the shin angles, which makes sense, but not
no one in
else.
weightlifting. I don't see anyone else apart from myself and Angus, I would say, have ever mentioned like shin angle or like look at a shin angle. So in weightlifting, one of the things that they talk about a lot. So it's so funny because if you have any understanding of anything outside of sport and how someone creates acceleration, you'll go, well, that's fucking dumb. So you'll see the shins drop forward and the heel will lift up. That's max propulsion. Yeah. And imagine if you've got 200 kilo barbell in your hands, when the shins drop forward, there's all this load at the front of the body and the heels are going to lift up more as you create propulsion, as you create force. So a lot of the times coaches will be like, no, that's an error. You got to stay flat footed for as long as you can, or like stay in your heels or just stuff like that. So it doesn't really, but then when you see the sport and you see the athletes moving at the highest level, you just don't see that. And then they're trying to, correct these errors, which are just really good strategies. So shin angles, I know it's so funny.
They're just overcorrecting. Like, you see someone who's
that's what it is.
Falling forward and their heel is coming off the floor.
He's going to move. He's going somewhere.
And then like you try and correct that with heel pressure. It's not heel pressure. Like keep the weight in your heels. It's a complete overcorrection. It's the same in squatting where someone is falling forward or hinging forward and then you're trying to keep all their weight in the heels. The common denominator is like get into your midfoot, and when you're going to push, like it's that midfoot to kind of metatarsal pressure. And this is a common movement strategy. Everywhere in the world, you're just going to see the maximum amount of push coming from that position. So overcorrecting that way, like push through your heels, is definitely not the answer because you're not going anywhere then.
So then a big one they do is like a flat-footed pull. So they'll be like, nah, you can't lift the heels in the pull. So you'll do a clean pull or you'll practice that extension, but the heels have to stay down.
Yeah. So guess what happens then? The knee just snaps back.
And then they're like, well, why does your knee and hip hurt? Like, I don't know. or like or then you'll see like us or you, what I've learned from you. And then how I teach a hinge is like floating heel. And they're like, why have you got the heel floating? Like, why is there a sheet of paper there? Or like, why are you doing a hinge on the edge of the plate? And I'm like, fucking dude, I don't know, man. Where do you start? Just like, give me $800 and I'll teach you what this is all about. I'll show you the red pill.
What does the $800 get me?
The $800, nah, for you, David, it's free. Don't worry. It's special for this episode only.
You know what I've started to think, what I've thought about for a long time. You probably saw it in the workshop, but I think to see a positive shin angle, because I think to simplify everything down around glutes and hips and internal rotation and all this stuff, I think I just want to start telling people, if you see a forward shin angle, a positive shin angle, that means that angle is being pretty much matched. Not necessarily, but that means that the femur is at an angle as well, right? And that means that you're going to use your hips because your shin is forward. So the language I teach is an anterior tilt. The shin is in an anterior tilt. The femur is in a posterior tilt or posterior tilting. And now you can use your hip. It's like saying touch your toes with locked out knees. You definitely can't use your hips at all. So just literally to get people to understand a positive shin angle and pushing from there cleans up, I would say, a large percentage of issues, regardless of the movement system or the movement that you're trying to employ. So yeah, I think like I've spoken about that for a long time, but I think I need to even narrow down even more on that and just be like positive shin angle for every time you want to push, and that will clean up things.
Even just like people teaching, there's just so much confusion. I guess the fitness industry is full of just like poor information being distilled down for generations, and just like them not knowing how to coach an RDL well, and them not knowing what relative motion is. And then if you don't know what that is and you don't know how to coach an RDL, you're just getting like a nice erector pump and a pelvis that is like really tucked under, or you're getting like a joint pain from being in a really extended position, or and in both populations or both people, you're just seeing the shins come back as they're hinging, and then as they're extending, creating hip extension, you're seeing the shins come back again. So yeah, I think just if people can learn how to teach a good quality hinge, just like it is so worth the time that you put into the person, because it is so difficult. It can be so difficult to coach because people are like, I feel it in my back. And I'm like, I know you will. Like, yes, we need to play around with the position, or that's because you're just initiating the movement with your hip. And then like even like the way you teach a seated good morning to kind of feel the sit bones into the chair, and like creating length through the ribs, length through the spine. That's something that I've been cueing a lot lately. And what are the abs doing? These are all things that I think they might sound complicated at first, but they play a big role in someone's movement strategy. And I think, there's so many ways we could take this conversation, but
that just helps people understand what their hips actually are. So like you're talking about the different archetypes, the different shapes, the narrows and the wides. Like the common denominator between, they all have different movement strategies, but the common denominator between a lot of the people that end up feeling like shit, regardless of the shape and regardless of how they move, is they don't actually use their hips well. So like I have a wide person who ends up just extending their back and shoving their ribs forward a ton, and they look like they can hinge well, but they can't. You have a narrow person who just flexes their spine and always stays counter-nutated at the sacrum. Or, sorry, I don't even like talking about sacrums. I just disregard sacrums. But like, at least the movement at the sacrum. But like, they begin in a counter-nutated. They naturally have a more counter-nutated sacrum, and they have no ability to actually get any anterior tilt. They also can't use their hips well. So like, narrows usually benefit more from learning to hinge, but that's because they can't create any length through the hamstring or the glute. Wides can create length through the hamstring and the glute, but only by compressing the shit out of their back. Actually, not really at the glute, more at the hamstring. So
it's just like this one. It's just like that.
Exactly. Shove your hips forward. and all you need to do to look at one of those is ask them to hinge, and they just go into a shit ton of neck extension immediately. Yeah. And that's just driving extension, like extensor tone into their body. And if you look at a powerlifter doing a deadlift, like they might set up in a very flexed spine. So they're going to set up, like a lot of the time, very strong powerlifters set up in a flexed spine to do their pull. But what do you see? You see neck extension all the time, every single time. And what that's doing is it's driving and eyes, like their eyes and neck are trying to look up, and that's driving extensor tone into their body. So are you going to clean that up with a powerlifter who's lifting a 1RM or doing a 1RM pull? Definitely not. But with someone else, like as soon as you try and move your hip, you have to extend your neck. That's telling you their idea of a hinge here is to just shove their ribs forward and their neck up. So yeah, there's definitely things to clean up. I saw a really good post from you where you were talking about cues being constraints. Can you talk about that? Because everyone's obsessed around constraints in their coaching and like never speaking, and I'm not so sure. I think we've swung too far.
Yeah, I just think people parrot what others say, and they haven't gone to the source or bothered to learn from someone who's an expert in that field. So I think if you think about what a constraint is, people think a constraint is a progression, or people think a constraint is a fucking pause squat. That's what they think a constraint is, where a constraint is much more low resolution understanding of changing or shifting someone's movement. So a good cue, well, if we think about how much fear people have placed on spinal flexion, so you're telling me that your words aren't going to impact the way someone's moves, and that definitely does happen. So if we understand that the cues that we use can steer people towards or away from certain movement options that we want them to achieve. If I tell someone to stay in their midfoot, if I tell someone to, I want you to feel this kind of sensation and that feedback is matching that sensation, I don't need to change the cue. And for often I don't even need to think about constraints because I'm quite good at communicating different cues to athletes, and I'm trying to speak their language rather than just keep parroting the same kind of cues and waiting for them to click onto it. One of the things that I always will say to someone once they click and understand the movement, I'm like, okay, how would you explain that to me? And they'll explain it to me in the weirdest way. And I'm like, okay, great. So that's how you were conceptualizing the movement. Like that's what you were thinking you were trying to do. And that's why it was taking so long. So yeah, I think cues are constraints. I think you can be very effective with coaching a very difficult movement. And like, how could you place any more constraints on a kickstand hinge? Like, you're on one leg. I need to teach you the movement. It's a very difficult movement to first learn because you're trying to create relative motion in someone who doesn't have that movement strategy.
Exactly. If they can do it well, they probably don't need it. You know what I mean?
Exactly right. Exactly right. They know how to feel their glutes. Like you're good athletes that have, that aren't necessarily in too much pain through their hip, that have a big glute. They're moving well. You could set them up in a kickstand hinge and show them what midfoot pressure feels like, and they can already do it. Whereas your other athletes, they're going to need to be coached into that position. So yeah, I know you kind of like have spoken about self-organization and how self-organization can be like lazy coaching. Self-organization for me is more so explaining to coaches why you're seeing certain strategies at high or intense situations. So like, why would you see a double bounce in a squat? That's self-organization. They didn't think consciously to double bounce out of a squat. I'm not saying that's like, no one, I hope not, is like our kind of coaching is saying that self-organization is just them learning the movement for the first time. That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
When I say that, I mean the false interpretation of self-organization. It's the idea that like they just and this is actually the perfect conversation for weightlifting, because the idea now, like the false interpretation of this whole self-organization thing is just like show athletes a movement or tell them to do a movement, and whatever way they do it is right. And imagine someone being able to, imagine you saying to me, you're going to coach me to snatch, and you say, here's a snatch, off you go, I'll see you in 30 days. And versus you spending 30 days with me every single day coaching a snatch. Which do you think is going to look better? Imagine the snatch that I'm going to come back with after 30 days if you just showed me once and I went away and did it the way my body wanted to do it. It's fucking, that's how people are coaching now. That infuriates me.
Yeah, I definitely don't coach like that. I'm extremely specific with how I will coach a movement, and you're just going to see, well, with good communication, you're going to see that person evolve a lot faster. Like I feel like I can get someone performing a good snatch in like 5 minutes, and that's with like effective coaching and quite a bit of cueing. And I'm talking quite a bit. Although the cues that I'm using are very general
and simple.
That's where the key is. So it's more, the emphasis should be on like simple, effective language that summarizes a lot of the things that you're wanting the person to do, opposed to, oh, let's just don't talk to them at all. It's like, no, I don't know. I don't even, good luck to those coaches. I don't know. I don't associate with those kinds of people. But going back to what you said about like athletes solving movement problems fast, I feel like
I think you said that.
Yeah. So
not me.
Sorry. Athletes will solve certain movement problems fast when they know that pattern already. So if I give someone the context would be, if I give someone a split snatch who's already really good at snatching, well, chances are a split snatch is pretty similar to a full snatch. They're probably they're gonna pick up the movement. If I give someone who's really effective at hopping and I give them a hop and bound pattern, that's the movement problem. They already know how to hop and how to bound. The problem is solving how can you put those two things together, and that's where the ability to practice things like repetition without repetition, which is stressing the body in different ways, which is creating or leveraging the principle of variability. That's how I would describe it. That's how I would describe solving movement problems, would just be you're giving someone variability. I don't know if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, David.
That definitely makes sense. Yeah, variety and variability, like different types of movements, and then the variability will emerge in terms of like every rep is going to be different within every different type of movement that they do. Every single rep is going to be different. Every single snatch is going to be different. There's your variability. And then the variety is actually, here's your 10 different types of ways that we can break down the snatch and practice like that type of movement, or break down some kind of bound or jump or whatever. And then your constraints around each one of those can drive more variability or less variability, whichever one you want. Because you will see, like, yeah, like, as if I was practicing a snatch now, like every rep would look completely different. Whereas I'm sure like the world's best weightlifter, a lot of their reps look very much the same, even though there's obviously different amounts of muscular activation and just slightly different joint angles, but much less than what would be for someone like me.
Yeah, there's a highly individual coordination pattern, but the way in which the variability rep to rep is a lot lower in someone who's more elite. But yeah, even just from like an injury prevention perspective, if you think about like getting athletes to solve movement problems, or if you think about the variability as a lens for injury prevention or injury management, you see athletes who just have no variability feel like shit. Or usually feel like shit. So you're stressing the body in the same ways, you're in the same positions all the time, and how valuable it can be, rather than thinking, oh, we need to prevent injuries, so we need to do this Nordic curl. Well, how about I just think of like 4 different hamstring exercises or 4 different foot placements for our foam roller bridge. And that's probably a really good lens to view programming through. And that's a really good way to just probably summarize how you would incorporate or build load management into a program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's like, I really like that, because as you get better at something, like you see, I'm very likely to develop an overuse injury if I started to work on a snatch now. I'm very unlikely to develop one, because every fucking rep is so different. You know what I mean? Like every rep is so different. Now, I also can't probably put enough load in that skill through my body to hurt myself. But then a great athlete could easily develop knee or elbow issues, and it's because they're so good at that movement that it's like they're stressing the same tissues in a very similar way over and over again. So they don't necessarily need more variability in the movement, like, oh, catch the snatch in a different way every time. That's going to make the skill potentially worse rather than better. But they need more variety in their training, where actually, you're not just doing these 2 or 3 movements all of the time. We're doing hundreds of movements. That's where you're doing you're doing your plyos. You're just trying to develop a really well-rounded athlete. And I think it's important for people to understand that, and that goes for every single sport. Athletes that are just doing people that are just doing the same movements again and again and again, it's not a variability problem, it's a variety problem, in my opinion. It's a lack of variety. That's the
We think of it like in most weightlifting gyms, the way that they would solve load management would just be, let's just do the same movement that you normally do, but just a little bit lighter. So that's not really solving the problem or managing load very well. So they're thinking about, cool, well, I just don't want to stress your body too hard, so let's just do these back squats at like a really meaningless weight, which is just a waste of time. So why don't we just think about, instead, how about we just put you in a split squat, and we can load that up, or a machine squat, or a something that has a bit more external stability, or maybe just like a leg extension, and that's going to drive a high level of stimulus, but with a different cost of fatigue, rather than just waste a slot of movement and just
exactly
just be like, just do light squats, just do light deadlift. This is the light deadlift day, which is just basically useless training. Yeah, 100%. Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
I like what you said about the client. Ask the client to explain back to me. So I do that a lot with my clients, especially first assessment, like someone who's injured, or actually not injured, more so in pain. Like, I have knee pain, I've had it for years, and I don't do it as much now, because I get smarter people, or more intelligent, and I don't even mean that as a knock. I get more people who are more interested in this stuff. So typically they've learned more on the movement side of things than on the pain side of things. But previously you get someone like in my town who has been to 5 physios and they have all these stories and they're coming in bitching about the previous physio saying he said this, he said that. So then I'll do an assessment. And I never like that. Like, I never get into, a lot of people will get into, yeah, he's fucking shit. Like, my way
Who are you
is the
working
way.
with? S&C coaches? No, all right, keep
going. No, it seems like the bitching thing is like universal. It's universal. It's a human trait.
Yeah.
Then I do an assessment and I'll do a full session with them and I'll ask them, I'll try and be as clear as possible and I'll ask them, okay, say you're going home to your wife later on. Can you explain now to me explain as if you're explaining to her what, like, I described your issue as and how we're going to try and fix it or clean it up or make it better. And the shit that they come back with is like,
I didn't say that.
I didn't say anything like that. So that's where you see online, like, people saying, bitching about, oh, this physio keeps giving this diagnosis or saying this about people. There is a lot of that, stupid physios saying stupid things and stupid coaches saying stupid things, but also people just interpret the things however the fuck they want, So that's really interesting that you ask someone to, like, explain. We just spent 20 minutes or 10 minutes coaching a movement. Now explain to me in your eyes, like, what we just worked on.
Oh, but honestly, it's more so at this point for my entertainment. I will just say to him, I'm like, just tell me, like, the story. I feel like that can be just one of the posts. I asked 10 of my athletes to come up with what a snatch is, and this is what they said. And it's like, oh my God, that's a new exercise. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But it makes it fun as well. And then it makes me realize, like, are you paying attention? You weren't fucking listening at all. You're like, oh, was I meant to be remembering that? It's like, dude, like... Yeah,
but that's I've spoken about a few times, like, conversations over cues, not over cues, but as in, like, if your cues aren't working, it's because they don't understand the movement. It's not that they need more cues. It's actually, you need to step away and have a chat here and say, like, why are we doing this? And what are we trying to achieve? And what's your understanding of this movement? And then once you get that, usually, like, one cue will tick the box, no problem. So clearly there you're having a conversation and you're seeing, like, it's not more cues that they need. They actually don't have a fucking clue what we're doing.
But isn't that, like, what coaching is? I feel like the art of coaching is so lost, probably because of the development of, like, online coaches and whatnot. I've had some coaches come in recently that have done so much mentoring, and then I'll get them to practice the thing that they've been mentoring. And I'm like, dude, just sign up with me for just a month. Like, my members that know none of what you're talking about and haven't done those mentorships could run this class, and you have so much theoretical understanding, but you're terrible at doing the thing that you're trying to learn. Yeah, and sometimes that theory can be quite useful. I'm like, yes, like, I'll shit stir him so bad. I'll be like, yeah, stay in mid stance. They're like, oh yeah, mid stance. I know that one. I'm like, fucking dude. Jesus Christ. I shouldn't have to say what that is. I should have to say, like, just bend your knees. So it's,
I know,
it's crazy.
I know. And that's where, like, I get frustrated because I get bucketed in with a lot of people who dive into a lot of theory. And I think now the idea is that, like, it's actually a fairly accurate idea, but the idea is, like, the more theory you understand, the worse coach you actually are. Or like, automatically that means you can't coach, or automatically that means you can't cue in a simplistic way. And that actually is the reality for a lot of people. It's fucking insane. It's
There's
insane.
an art to it. There's an art to it. You do it very well. And yeah, that's something I'm always trying to develop.
We get a lot of people coming to our workshops and say, like, that they had heard a lot of this stuff before, from us or from others. Actually, the more and more they go on, the more, like, they haven't, to be honest, because it's very different from a lot of other people's stuff, I think. At least I want it to be. But the thing that they take away is, like, the coaching side of it, is actually doing it.
Well, because you look at a lot of seminars. I'm trying to organize a seminar for Sydney. That's one of my goals for this year, is to go there and to book out or sell out a seminar, whether it's just for my clients, just to meet my Sydney clients, because I just think that would be fun. But I was looking at, they've got someone else going there. I'm looking at the brief. He's like, oh, this is the brief, just to compare what you were trying to do. And they're spending so much time on like, oh, this is the hang snatch. This is the high hang snatch. It's like, no one gives a shit about that. They are so poor at communicating at like those things. Just show me how you teach the movement and I'll be able to clean up your processes so much faster through good and clear communication. But yeah, definitely an underrated piece of a good course.
It is, and it does lead people to be the idea that like, okay, less knowledge is better, because like the more I learn, the less I can coach. It's not the case. It's less knowledge is never the answer. It's being able to do everything better. It's being able to coach better. It's being able to understand it better, assess better, communicate better, sell it better, just get better results. It's everything. So I think, the coaching side of it, that's the fun part, is being able to see very clearly, like I can see so clearly what this person's strategy is. And then usually I can clean it up. Like, I don't mean I, like you, whoever can clean it up pretty quickly once you can see it, if you're a good coach. But yeah, most of these people can't actually coach it because they can't do it, because they've never tried it. They've just thought about it, which is wild.
No, I would agree with you on that. Do you think that that's something that you've developed over time, or do you feel like you've just naturally been a good communicator? I feel like the fact that you kind of have that marketing background, I feel like you're always thinking about, okay, what's my message? How can I refine my message? I feel like is that the type of person you are, or do you feel like maybe you have like that, you've had like intellectual soundboards you'll bounce ideas off, or
I have no soundboards.
Read the room.
I have
just
no
read the room. Fucking, I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know. I'm not good at introspective stuff like that, where you ask me like, or where people ask me like, how did this develop and blah, blah, blah. I'm really poor at that. I'm really poor at figuring out like what type of person are you what type of person, all these like neurotypes and stuff. Like, I don't know.
No, don't go into that. No, that gives me a headache.
Yeah, well, I know I don't. But in general, like any of these questions, I don't know what type of person I am.
I feel like for myself, it's innate. I just feel like you're either a good communicator or what did Stephen King say? If you're a good writer, you can probably be great, but you're not going to be excellent. It's just, I feel like sometimes some of those skill trees are capped out.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when I look at, I think a big part of it is, I think you're right, and I think a big part of it is, did you read books when you were younger? Did you read when you were younger? It doesn't matter what you read, like some kind of story, Roald Dahl or something like that. But I did a decent bit of reading when I was younger. I'm not a great writer, but I think I know how to tell a story. And if you look at comedians telling stories, you're right. You can just read the room. You're just speaking. Like you're in a room with someone. You're in a group of friends, and someone is talking, and they're just fucking banging on, and they can't read the room that like this is going down like a lead balloon here.
Yeah.
Like I'm definitely not the best storyteller. I'm definitely not the funniest person. Far from it. Not the most entertaining person. But I can sit in a room, and if I'm telling a story, I can tell that it's going down like a lead balloon, and I'll finish that story pretty quickly, So I don't know. I think I'm an okay communicator, and I think I just not particularly intelligent. So I have to like make things fairly simple for myself a lot of the time, and I think that helps. Yeah, you have made me think about that, like how.
For me,
but I do think I'm a good coach. I do think I'm a really good at coaching. So I don't know how that came about. Maybe it's innate, maybe it's not.
It's interesting.
But I have an order of priority with my exercises, and I have a very good eye for movement. So I think a lot of it comes back to a good biomechanical knowledge. I think a shit ton of it comes back to a good biomechanical knowledge, because when you're like, let's say I'm teaching a hinge, and this will be hopefully practical information for people, like the order of priority. Let's say you're teaching a kickstand hinge. So there's things that you can do with rotation of the pelvis, things that you can do with the neck, things that you can do with the hand positions, things that you can do with the ribs and the breathing. There's so many things. And once you, like, I teach people all of those things at a workshop, but then I hopefully explain that there's an order of priority. The first order of priority is push your hips back without your knee moving. Because no, actually, the first order of priority is bend your knee, get set up in a good position. The second order of priority is push your hips back without straightening your knee. Because if you can't do that, it does not matter about rotation. It does not matter about necks or spines or pelvises or neutral pelvis or anything like that. If they keep straightening their knee, nothing else matters. So, like, my knowledge around just that in itself when coaching a hinge means I can be so clear on my cue. And there's many ways to stop them bending your knee. I can put my hand in the back of their knee. I can put a finger at the front of their knee. I can put their knee against something. I can put their knee behind something. I can keep telling them, don't straighten your knee, don't move your knee. It doesn't matter. Like, I have all these tools to stop them straightening their knee, but the order of priority is none of the other shit matters if they straighten their knee. So maybe that's the answer, is just like being super clear on what we actually need to work on. Because if someone keeps straightening their knee, I know that it won't work. There's no point doing the exercise if they keep straightening their knee. So I think maybe it comes back to that.
So it comes back to having thought out processes.
Yes.
So that's the key. Damn it. I wish. Yeah.
That's the key.
And a lot of people don't have really thought out ideas. And that's something that I even knew in myself when I started writing the mentorship or writing the handbook. I was like, fuck. Okay, now I actually have to think about stuff when I put it down on paper. Now I actually have to reflect internally and what are my priorities?
Yeah. So thinking about not just what your priorities are, but your order of priorities in your movements. If, like, is there a keystone to some of the cleans, the clean and jerks, the snatches, like thinking about what the keystone things are there, that if people get this wrong, everything else goes to shit. That's something worth thinking about. Hey guys, David here. Just wanted to take a super quick break from the show to tell you about our foot program /Achilles /ankle /toe, shin, calf, just lower leg program. So it shows you the exact step-by-step progression that I use with all my lower leg clients. And I didn't think anything would eclipse the popularity of lower body basics. And honestly, the foot program is doing it. People absolutely love it. It's been made its way through the industry like wildfire. So if you haven't got your hands on it yet, I think it's probably the biggest thing you could do to improve your results that you're getting with your clients and also change how you move from the ground up. So I'll put the link in the show notes. Check it out. I promise you won't regret it. Tell me about your come up on the social media side of things. You released a program or your manual, and I think you're pushing hard on. It looks like you're pushing hard, like pushing your ideas out, trying to be consistent with that. So, what are you up to there?
With social media, I want to do a daily post so bad. Like, that's like my commitment. So it says, like, I have these 3 things on my whiteboard. It says daily post, must do that, and I usually do that at 10:30 at night, which is really bad. That's when I'm my most creative. And then it's like YouTube. I try and put out a couple a week on YouTube. That's growing slowly. But when the mentorship's on, I really find it hard to just I don't want to post unless it's thought-provoking, which is, I've kind of fucked myself up there. But anyway, I just hate those posts where it says to get 8 hours of sleep and drink water. And it seems to be a lot of the coaches really like putting that out there. So I'm much more likely to put out a long carousel, which is kind of like my arguments or my thoughts around one of those topics. So whether it's like, I don't know, what some of the people can look at the posts that I've been doing lately, but those have been going really well. And there's a strategy behind that. And that is that I want the page to grow really slowly, and I don't want it to go viral. And I don't want a lot of engagement as far as like a lot of new people coming to the page. I want them to slowly filter through, slowly interact with things, and then potentially message me or buy something. I am not interested in putting out reels. I'm not posting any more reels. I'm really deliberate on, it must be a post or carousel. And it must be like, I must find it interesting. If I don't find it interesting, why would I put it out there? So they've been...
Why no reels?
No reels because I don't want them to go viral. And I feel like a lot of reels do quite poorly. The engagement's really poor on some of the reels. And unless it's like a very, I don't know, I just feel like my style at the moment, the way I'm enjoying writing, I'm enjoying just maybe typing out a few thoughts. And then I feel like I compare some of those concepts quite well to some of the video ideas, and it explains the message that I'm trying to get across quite simply. And I feel like the carousel, I don't know, people get a bit more of a dopamine kick out of just like swiping through. One of the things I found with reels is people just don't want to wait 10 seconds to learn everything or see the dot points. I'd rather just, can I just swipe through it at my own pace? Those tend to have more saves and sends. So like the engagement's there and people interact with it a little bit better than some of the other style of posts. But as far as the content itself, like doesn't really matter, reel, fucking whatever you want to do. I don't really care what people do. That's what works for me. But as far as those posts, they're very much, I don't know, you kind of have a very similar style in terms of like the carousel. I feel like it kind of tells a bit of a story.
It tells a story.
And then at the end, buy my product at the end. Get
I don't put it.
I do it here and there. I do it here and there because I think it's valuable. Or I might have like, what I want to do now is like, this is coming up. By the way, this is coming up. And I feel like it might get buried in the stories. I feel like it gets buried quite often. People will tap through and not see it. But I feel like the person who's generally interested, and people don't like them. Like people don't press like. They will read it all. I know they're reading it all, and they'll see the announcement at the end. But yeah, I feel like they
don't press like. You see,
they're always watching it.
This is so some of my posts, like recent posts I've done a lot more carousels recently. They'll get 5,000 shares and 3,000 likes. So that's coaches, and I know there's a lot of people who bitch about me. Would never like or comment. There's people that have been watching my stories, every story. You can go in and see who looks, and it's like every story they've watched for 5 years and never liked one post. Why do you think? Why do you think they're doing that? It's, they don't want to show that they're like. They don't want to show. They're just people who are takers, though. They want to just take everything and never even say like, "Here's the return on my. Here's my gratitude." Just literally click and like that. And it sounds like such a small thing, but that tells me a lot about that type of person.
I still think the like button is a dead button, but anyway,
it's not though, because I would use that on. I would use that. I don't consume almost any content. If I'm on Instagram, I'm doing it on my own page. But like, I would purposefully, even if I don't really like a post, if I like the person, I'll click like on the post. Yeah, if I hate the post, I won't. But if it's like an okay post, I'll show them a like. I think so. It's then as
far as like coming up with more of those thought-provoking posts, it's not saying like they're like, this is like my brain is expanding. But some of those can be like with you. This is like a question for you, or we can talk about it. But I feel like sometimes it can be quite difficult to continuously refine those ideas or come up with those ideas. Like people who say it's easy, I just like post, I just talk about whatever, and there's like a 10 slide carousel. Like, fuck off. I know it took you 3 hours to do that post. And someone who I really admire is Alec Blennis. He's got the Murph record. Alec Blennis, you might see his post. Anyway, doesn't matter. But what he does really well is he won't post unless he thinks it's interesting, and he adds so much value. Some of his Q&As are so valuable. He's so intelligent, and he just doesn't post for the sake of it, and that's something that I just don't want to do. So if I'm not feeling it, I don't need to just shill out rubbish for the sake of it. So I think there's a bit of a strategy there.
It's a strategy. It's a fine line. Like I've challenged myself a lot to put out a good post. Now, some of them are reposts and stuff. Some of them are okay. Some of them I think are very good. Some of them don't do well. Some of them do well. I literally, that doesn't cross my mind anymore. Like how it's just, do I think it's okay or not? But I've challenged myself to do, like you're saying, that guy Alex, is it? Like try and do good posts, but also try and do them every single day. And that's a challenge. And I think whenever you can choose to work on a difficult thing, work on a difficult thing. Because what you're saying is like anyone can do posts. There's such a low barrier to entry in this industry, and obviously on social media, where anyone can do a post saying drink your water, like get your sleep, and like that's valuable information. Don't get me wrong, but it's a low barrier to entry to get into the fitness industry. So that means anyone can get in, but I want to do things that are high barrier to entry, and that requires thinking. And so anyone can say like track your calories on MyFitnessPal. That doesn't make you any better than anyone else saying that. Better is a bad word, but make you stand out anymore. Anyone can say get your sleep. I want to be the person that anyone can now look at knees over toes guys Instagram and thinks they can fix knee pain. I want to be the person that can help someone's knee pain that has been to 15 of the best physios, coaches, doctors, surgeons in the world. I want to be the person who, like, you're an athlete earning millions of dollars a year here, and you're gonna go to the Olympics, you're gonna win a gold medal, this and that, and no one can help your Achilles issue except for me. So that requires, not except for me, but I can be the person that can help that when a lot of people can't. And that is a high barrier to entry thing. There's like people can't replicate that. So not very easily, at least. So that also requires me doing high barrier to entry things, which is proving that I'm that type of person. And that means doing high value posts for me at the moment every single day, which is a massive challenge, but it's worth it. I think for me at the moment, it's worth it.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. I think the high barrier to entry, or certain people can, try look at another person's stuff and try and replicate it. But yeah, I think that's probably what I've been trying to do then, without thinking about it. I've just been trying to make things that are maybe shown in a different light. And obviously, if you're saying it's that, then yeah, then it's working.
Yeah, because when you look at you're developing a model which around movement and around weightlifting, and teaching that model, that inherently is high barrier to entry in a couple of ways. High barrier to entry in terms of the only people that are going to come to you to learn are people that are interested. So are like actually intellectual, actually want to think, actually want to be better. So there's a barrier to entry in terms of who's going to come in, but also there's a barrier to entry in terms of like how you separate yourself from the rest. So those are you're ticking two really important boxes there. And that is not something that someone can just buy from you and take and like steal or replicate overnight. They can't do that. You've put years into this. They can't just replicate that overnight. And that is a key barrier to entry. And like before we started the recording, you spoke about how you said to me how I feel like I'm almost ready to like really hit go on this, and just I've been consistent for quite a while, and now I'm ready to, maybe in my words it would be like I've given so much value for a long time, and now I'm ready to cash some of those checks in. So like the only reason you can cash those checks in is because you've given out a lot in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's something I've learned from you, just constantly trying to deposit information or constantly making deposits into the community. So, yeah. But it's not even, I don't view it as like it's a virtuous thing to do. I just view it as that's just what you should do, or just what you do. There's no connotation associated to it. And I just think if you're going to build something, ultimately you have to you have to put your hand out first. So if people are interested in these kind of concepts, then that's what I've been trying to delve into and trying to piece together, because in weightlifting, specifically, a lot of those models are so outdated, and a lot of those models or thought processes are so old and haven't been. I like to think about it like this. Like, imagine if Steve Jobs, when he died, everyone was like, okay, whatever he was thinking about at that day, that is the pinnacle of Apple. And they're like, no, well, we've carried on from his success, and we've developed greater products. We continue to grow the company. And you think about these coaches from the 70s, if they were still alive today, or if they were still training today, they would have evolved the sport so much further than what you guys have done, because all you've done is you've taken the stuff from the 70s and you've brought it into 2023 and you haven't made any changes. And those concepts just haven't evolved. They haven't been updated, and they're not relevant with the people that they're working with. So not only do we know so much more about human movement, or do we have access to so much more intelligent people who have really thought out models, that in of itself is so valuable. And then when you bring in, different people from the industry, I think about Matt Watson, who hasn't really heard about a lot of these, like he probably hasn't really cared for or doesn't really need PRI concepts to help him help someone with human movement, because he's got his own principles. He's got his own model, the way he sees human movement. And shin angles somehow are a big part of, like, not somehow, it's not by chance, it's by that has emerged as being an important part of propulsion, or important part of human movement. Yeah. And we can see that regardless of who you are, whether you're a DGR model, whether you're Matt Watson, whether it's PRI, a lot of those same concepts are going to come to the surface because they're universally true. So it doesn't really matter which one you want to use. Ultimately, as time goes on, we're all going to be sharing the same thing, because we're all talking about human movement in a very similar way. We might use different language, but ultimately that's what I'm trying to do. And someone who's actually helped me with that has been Mladen Janovic, and he's got a very modular approach to programming, and everyone is going the other way. You need individualization. If you're like, there's so many ads I'm seeing on social media at the moment, or so many things where it's like, the reason why you're struggling is, you're going to get a tailor-made program. Mm-hmm. Where Mladen comes from a data science background, or he has that lens of data science and those principles, where everything is very modular. I pull this out, put this in, and that is going to create this response. And having those slots and categorizing things in these kinds of buckets. So there's certain things that you're looking for in a hinge, and that'll all be very modular. And then there's certain rep schemes. I feel like AI can be a really powerful tool for you to leverage or create that kind of programming model. And I think that's just going to make you filter information better. So I think, yeah, that's definitely where I'm going with it all, with all the posts, is just trying to help coaches with that good model. Like you say with your model, David, how easy is it for you to filter a new movement system? It's so easy. It just passes through your model, and then suddenly you're like, oh, actually I might take this concept, or I didn't think about it in this way. Or you're like, fuck, none of that was all shit, that just didn't even get through the system. So it makes it so easy for you, and especially for young coaches who are being bombarded with lots of information, to think, well, no, that's actually this is the kind of concepts I want to be thinking about, and the rest can go to the side.
Yeah, I love it, man. We had in Florida at Jeff, the Flexi Bulls place, there was a young coach at the end of the weekend, and just pretty new to the industry, and somehow he ended up at my workshop first. That's pretty much like the first workshop he went through, but he's heard all people speaking about like all these other systems, and like, not me, but other people saying like how shit certain systems are, and certain systems are incredibly shit, but I just wouldn't be saying that about them necessarily. If you're one-to-one with me, I might, but on podcasts I probably wouldn't say too much. But he said, like, how am I going to he asked like a small group of us after workshop, how am I going to avoid this stuff, or how am I going to avoid making all these mistakes and seeing something like that. And like my answer and a couple of people's answers, and I think Jeff's answer was like, you're going to be exposed to all of this stuff, and you just hopefully have a good model, a good starting point to filter out the crap. You can't avoid it. It's just being able to see what's good and what's not. And like what you're saying with Matt, that was so clear to me when I first came across Matt, because I taught a workshop, and I had done a couple of podcasts talking about yielding plyometrics. And I came across Matt, and I had him on the podcast, and he was talking about deep tier plyometrics. And like almost at the same time, now we both had been doing that stuff for years, but almost at the same time we came across each other and just chatted about this stuff. And I could just see someone who's a really good coach who's able to think about this. And that's exactly like and that's just an example, but like all the things that Matt talks about, like a full foot contact, or it's basically being able to get on your midfoot better.
It's all the same thing. It's all
the same thing.
thing.
So that's where like straight away,
instead of saying mid stance, you're just saying that. Like you're saying, mid foot. How important those things are.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And like, that's not to say I might not coach a plyometric where like there's different types of, you can do a hop for more of a horizontal biased hop, and you're going to have a more heel contact maybe. You're going for a little bit more distance than a little bit more height. You're going to have probably like you're coming straight down on top of the foot more. So you have more of a heel contact. If you're doing a split stance, pogo, for example, you're going to have the back foot is going to have a more of a forefoot contact. So like, it's not to say like you should always contact just on the midfoot or somewhere around the mid to forefoot, but regardless of which one of those we're doing, we want to be able to find the midfoot at some stage throughout it really well and push from there. So like, I could just see that's exactly what you're saying there. Like having a lens, I could just literally see straight away within 5 minutes of talking to him or looking at his content, like this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah,
you know?
He's got a well thought out model. And
Exactly.
That's one of the things that I bring up with the coaches at the start is, and you can make it very conceptual and you can lose a lot of people there. And I don't want to do that. So it's better if we just talk about, what are good models? What's an example of one? And Matt's one's the one I bring up because it's just so easy to discuss and talk about.
And see. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very visual, like, yeah. Yeah.
And then you can look at something like, say, I don't know, you might talk about an old school weightlifting technical model and how that might not be applicable in lots of different contexts. So universally, it's probably not a good model because it doesn't hold up to when you test it. And something that you talk about a lot is how confident you guys are with DGR and how those principles, people can try and pull them apart. But ultimately, the principles that it rests on are going to be, pretty strong and present in a lot of different good models, or like a lot of models that are tried and tested everywhere. So that's all it is.
Exactly, man. Brandon, legend. It's nice to see your come up. I think having an eye for talent. I think I have an eye for talent. Like you can see, like probably most people do. You can see when you're working with a client, you can see like they're going to be a good client or not. When you're in a workshop, you can see who the best people in the workshop are going to be pretty quickly. Yeah, so I think you're definitely one of the people in the industry that's going to shape the industry and do a really good job over the next 10 years. So keep at it, man. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks so much, David.
What do you want to plug, or where should people follow you?
They can just follow me on Instagram and that's it.
Go from there. Buy your shit.
We're all having a crack. We're all going to have a crack today, all right?
Okay, brother. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, David.
Hey guys, David here again. I just wanted to come on and I felt compelled a little bit to come on and summarize the last probably 15 or 20 minutes of that chat. And I just want you to try and recognize when you see someone, when we look at people that are at the top of the industry or any industry, you start to see people, you maybe put them on a pedestal, or you think like they're amazing and I'm not as amazing. And I want you to recognize with someone like Brandon, a lot of the guests that are on the podcast, and me as well, hopefully there's no pedestal there. Hopefully you can see a path to how people can get to doing a really good job. And hopefully you can start to recognize some of the qualities that they employ and are just part of them that helps them get there, and see it along the way rather than just looking at it in a few years and saying, okay, everyone looks up to them, they're amazing and I'm not. Start to see it happening in front of your eyes, start to recognize it happening in front of your eyes. And I think there's like 3 or 4 key things that for someone like Brandon or others, if you can recognize it, then you can start to be it yourself or just do it yourself. So one is just don't be a dickhead. Be a good guy, a good person, a good guy or a good girl. Don't be a dickhead. Being a dickhead is easy. You will get quick wins on social media, but in the long run, you're just going to collect a lot of people that really don't like you. And even the people who kind of like your content, they're probably dickheads as well. So number 1, be a good person. Number 2, have fun. Smile. Like, just be yourself. don't take everything so seriously all the time. We're talking about movement. Yes, we're talking about pain. Yes, we're talking about performance. Some of this, it's serious business, but you don't have to take yourself so seriously all the time. Have fun with it. Have a laugh. Relax a little bit. Number three, put your thoughts out there. Or actually, number three, before even that one, think, use your brain, think about things, think, try and critically think. I know that's easy to say, but try and look at when someone's saying something. Don't just take it for face value. Don't be like a skeptic. Being skeptical is fine, but don't be closed-minded. But also don't be naive. Try and think about things. Use your brain. And number four, once you've used your brain, put your thoughts out there. And I think if you can do those four things, like be a nice person, have fun, think about things deeply, and put your thoughts out there. You do that consistently over time. There's no excuse and there's no reason why you won't get to exactly where you want to get to. And that's all I'm trying to do as well. And I'm trying to do that consistently as I can. And it's easy to fall into the trap of being anarchy bollocks all the time, or like being super cynical about everything all the time, or being super naive about everything. It's that middle ground, being nice, being cynical when you need to be, but actually analyzing things, putting your thoughts out there, having fun. That will be a good recipe, I would say, when you see someone like Brandon or you see others who are making, or I think are doing big things in the industry. So secondly, I also wanted to try and sell you something. I wanted to try and get you onto DGR Interactive. The other common recipe that a lot of great people have in the industry is they're on DGR Interactive, like Brandon, like others. They learn there. We have all these videos that are only like 10 minutes, 15 minutes long. You can watch them. It doesn't take long and you will learn a shit ton. It's very practical and you will learn. So just an example of some of the recent uploads. I did a gait analysis on a client, an athlete that I was working with. I looked at him running from a rear view. So we started to look at these hikes and drops of the pelvis, this kind of frontal plane, side bends, lateral kind of compression, stuff like that. I did a video on improving shoulder internal rotation. When you look at the anatomy of the posterior and posterior lateral shoulder, you start to see like how important adduction might be of the shoulder to load and lengthen these tissues. And I spoke about that and gave you a couple of practical drills there. Peter Wright actually did a guest presentation on return to play progressions for multi-directional athletes. So getting athletes back to running and sprinting and change of direction and all of these options. I think it's like 23 minutes long, just pure gold. There's a couple of videos there on asymmetry, center of mass, hip lock. I'm just looking at the list in front of me. Lee Taft did a 180 series, a lot of warm-up drills. Graham Morris has one on high-speed running. I did another one on the glute max, IT band, and energy transfer. These are all like 10, 15 minutes long, pure gold. If you have 10 minutes a week, you can make so much improvement. So jump onto that, DGR Interactive. I'll put the link in the bio. And apart from that, the link in the show notes. Yeah, link in the show notes. Apart from that, hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll chat to you guys next time.